So it's important to, I think, have a compass point, but be a little bit flexible on the routes that get you there.
Welcome to Built to Scale, where we have real conversations with entrepreneurs just like you about what it takes to build a thriving business without sacrificing your personal life. My name is Craig Severinsen, and I help people make more money working with better clients while also working less. And now I'm sharing it all with you. Let's dive in. What's up, everybody? Craig Severinsen here, and welcome to episode 24 of Built to Scale. And this episode, I'm really excited to share with you because we've got Angie Callen of Career Benders on the show. And Angie and I first met at Social Media Day in Denver this year. We were both speakers, and it was really funny because as she was speaking, I was just like, holy cow, yes, exactly. Like, she was saying the things that I always think and say about LinkedIn. And then we connected afterwards, and she came up to me and said the same thing to me about my presentation. And we were like, holy cow, this is like, we're on the same wavelength. So there's so much gold that she brought today that I really want you to just pay attention. And in particular, three things. Number one, we talk a lot about growth versus scale and how she is actually in the transition right now between growing her business and putting those systems in place to scale. So she talks really specifically about the things she's doing to make that shift, which I think you'll find really, really valuable. Number two, she talks about being like just the right amount ahead in your business. And what I mean by that is like hiring that employee or taking that next step just right before you're ready. She says you need to do it 20% before you're ready. Like, if you need to hire somebody, you got to do it just right before you're ready. So that's a really good advice. And she's going to go into detail about how she's applying that in her business. That is absolute gold. And then number three, one of the things she talks about is using goals, and gives us some caution in not using your goals like a laser pointer where you're so focused on it that you miss the other opportunities, but instead using your goals as a compass so that you can find other opportunities as you're moving towards your goals. Okay, so that's what I got for you today. I'm really excited about it. Let's dive in. Angie, how you doing? How are things going?
I'm doing all right, Craig. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah? Why is that? No, I'm joking. Put you on the spot. Why are you excited, Angie?
Well, I mean, pro tip, shameless plug. You and I had the opposite version of this conversation last week for a future episode of No More Mondays. So it kind of gave me a little preview into, I think, the tone and flow and how much fun this conversation will be today. And I think it will be a good time to kind of tell you a little bit more about my business experience on the flip side of hearing about you last week. So it's kind of perfect.
Yeah, exciting. I was telling Jason, our producer, right before this call, it's like, hey, me and Angie had a conversation last week, and I know that we have the same like energy and like the same opinions on a lot of stuff. So you might have to rein us in because we're going to be nerding out on a bunch of stuff. So yeah, go ahead. Let's dive into. Tell us a little bit, just for context. Like, what is your business? What do you do?
Sure. I have a business called Career Benders. It was founded almost 5 years ago at the beginning of 2018. And we provide career coaching, professional resume services. It's kind of all things professional development. We dabble in some executive coaching, and also kind of a fun little niche of the career / business coaching overlap is employee to entrepreneurship coaching. So helping people how to figure out how to shift into entrepreneurship as an element of their career plan, which is kind of cool because that's basically like step one to then getting to Built to Scale. So it's almost complementary. But yeah, it's a full service professional services firm focused on helping job seekers and professionals navigate the very challenging and interesting market that we live in today.
So if you had to say, like, what's the ultimate result or the big picture, like this is what they get when they work with us, what would you say that is about your business or about your clients?
Well, and I struggle with the word coach, which is probably a whole other episode of a podcast. But, what's unique about my approach to coaching, because, speak the language of your audience, friends, is I'm very outcomes driven. And so I think really what people get when they work with me or work with Career Benders is whatever it is, whether it's a job search, whether it's a career change, whether it's, I want to start a business, it's really getting a picture into what are your goals, and then let's achieve that as an outcome. And one of the things I think you and I really leveled on when we chatted last week was that idea of, when I say goals, it's like, what do you want your life to look like? And then how does the career component of that fit within that picture? And how do we design a roadmap to that outcome and get you on that path, versus just continuing to kind of fail forward in a career or move forward aimlessly without really having that kind of baseline or being out of whack.
100%. And I think, man, there's so much in what you just said that I want to unpack. Like that, I had like 4 different spots. I'm like, oh man, we should dive into that. But I think this is the first one. Let's just pick up where you're talking. It's like, life is way too short, and I think that this idea of, there's a lot of old ideas that are kind of falling away, right? But one of the big ones that I think especially entrepreneurs need to embrace is this idea of you work hard for 60 years and then one day you get to do what you want, right? Like that to me seems like the most miserable way to live your life. And I think that there's something nice about the security of like having a job that you're working at all the time. But like, if you can't enjoy what you're doing, if you can't go on vacations, if you can't have the hobbies that you want and spend time with the people you love, then you're not living a life worth living. Like it's all got to fit together. Right? Like it can't just be this one dimensional, oh, here's my business and here's my life. No, it's life that happens to include business and personal time.
So in true form, my response to that has like 4 or 5 points. But what I'll say is that you and I both kind of arrived at, I think, this conclusion and this perspective because we were out of alignment, either in our businesses, in other careers, or both. And it's funny because just anecdotally, when I look back on my 20 years of professional experience, whether I was working for somebody or not, I've always had this like thread of entrepreneurial spirit. And it took a lot of factors kind of coming together to be like, oh, I should do something with that. But when I kind of evaluate the common thread, it was always rooted in wanting to help people be better versions of themselves, because I think that we accept mediocrity in this country way too much. And when I say mediocrity, it's kind of that mentality that we are meant to live to work, versus figuring out how to make career a component of an overall satisfaction. And, I experienced this first because also like, okay, let's work like we're dogs until we're 60. And then we don't have the physical health to go do a lot of things that are on that bucket list we created 40 years prior. And all of this really started like coming into play for me when I lived in Boston after I started my career. I was a civil engineer when I started my career, which I knew in college was not what I wanted to do. But I had an opportunity to move from Boston to the Colorado Rockies, which is where I live now. And I've lived here in the resort world for like 15 years. And so like we go do stuff on a daily or weekend basis that people carve out a week to do. Yeah. Whitewater raft, fly fish, ski at world-class resorts is like a daily activity for us. And I'm so grateful to have been able to craft that foundation of life so that when I'm 60, I don't go, okay, I guess I'll go do my week of skiing in Aspen now that I have a little bit of freedom. And so it's also totally possible. And I think that's one of the things that you and I have in common is helping people see that and maybe take a step towards it.
Totally, 100%. I love what you're saying. I'm just thinking about, I think that you can have that. It's more of a mindset, right? Rather than like, I love that you physically moved to somewhere and that opened up the doors for you. And having lived in Utah for several years, like I love the, in the West, being able to point at a mountain and say, hey, let's go climb that because it's public, it's public property.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have to, no matter where you're living, if you can't physically move, you have to find that balance where you're at, and everyone can find it. I used to really be like, when I was younger, I'd be like, man, life is backwards, because like when you need money the most, like you need to buy, you've got a young family, you've got to buy, you want to buy a house, you want to do all this stuff that's like major milestones. You have like no credit and no money. Like, you know what I mean? Like you're at the
so
bottom
true.
of the barrel when you need it the most. And it used to be, to me, it used to be really connected, right? Like you can't be happy unless you've got the stuff. You can't be happy unless you got the money. And as you get the money, you realize that that's not true, right? As you get the success, you realize that that's not true. And so you have to be able to find happiness no matter where you're at. And it's that weird balance between contentment and ambition, right? It's a weird balance between those two things because they seem polar opposite, but happiness lies in the balance of the two things.
I think that's so true. And it's a little bit like, how do you grow sustainably? And I think that's both in life and business or career. And at the same time, do that with integrity and alignment to, I think, a sense of self-worth and self-satisfaction that you've been able to find internally, which is also kind of a rare thing in society. But you mentioned it, Craig, is that idea that things are shifting. Because even when I was graduating from high school, entering college, and even when I left college and started my professional life, that was still at the kind of later edge of that. You're going to go do a job because it's what you do. You don't need to like it because it just makes you money so that you can do the things that you need to do to support your life and your family. And you're going to do that thing for 30 years. Maybe you would change employers once, and then you can retire and go do the life things that you really always wanted to do while you're slaving away from the man. And that shifted a lot after the Great Recession. Millennials came on the scene and we started demanding a different climate. And over the events of the last 3 years, I think we've even spiraled further into that idea of satisfaction, carving your own path, making changes, shifting around, changing careers, and all those kinds of things. And it's a refreshing change to see. And it's also really fun to be part of, both in the work I do and as somebody doing it as well.
Yeah, awesome. Millennials ruin everything, man. We're the worst, aren't we?
I claim it only when convenient because I was born in 1980. Right. And so I hover beautifully in the middle of a cynical Gen Xer and a hopeful millennial.
Well, what's funny is, so I was born in 86 and I have a brother-in-law who was born almost 10 years after us, like in the 90s. And so technically still millennial, right? But there's such a difference between older millennials and younger millennials. Yes. Even like there's such a gap. It's crazy. And I'm sure that maybe we won't dive into this too much because I think that that's probably true of every generation. Thinks, oh man, sure. We're so different. We're so, but we've been picked on.
We're not what they say we are. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, so this is switching gears a little bit. Well, a lot from what we were just talking about, but a little bit from the conversation so far. I love on this show to really talk about how people are growing business, right? Like, how are you growing business? So tell us, like, what has worked? You've experienced a lot of growth over the past, you said 5 years you've been in business, right?
Yeah. And it's been a really interesting whirlwind and this is fun. This is kind of interesting because for those of you that listen to Craig's podcast regularly, that kind of definition of, let's say, growth versus scaling. And you and I define it exactly the same way, which I think is really cool. So we've experienced a lot of growth over the last 5 years, and it was wanted, but wasn't necessarily intentional. And there was definitely a 6 to 8 month period in there where it came on quite suddenly. And I did not have the right foundation in place or the right checks and balances in place to take it on in a sustainable way. And that's where I started feeling that kind of like entrepreneurial pain point of, I've created a really great job for myself. I was working like 70 hours a week. And I mean, you just can't, what's that saying? You can't fill from an empty cup. Like, especially when you're in this kind of like coaching and advisory space, you are not doing quality work when you are spreading yourself that thin. And so after about 6 months of it, I was a shell of a human and had to start kind of putting the foundation in place. I had to jack up the house and build a foundation underneath of it.
So let me
it takes a little while to do that. Go ahead.
Let me stop you real quick. So just to make sure that, because I think you're, just so that everyone understands, when you say growth versus scale, right? What I'm understanding what you're saying is like you experienced a big growth in your business in terms of like clients coming in, but totally. Because you didn't have like I'm guessing teams and systems, it's like you just created a ton of work for yourself, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I had really good solopreneurial systems in place, but I, at that point, was, I have grown to go back and just, I think, give a little bit more insight. I have done very, very well at one-on-one coaching. It is what I excel at. And at that point, it was, I'm doing a whole lot of one-on-one coaching. And so at some point, there's only so much one person can do.
No,
And I
100%.
have always envisioned a business where, I coached that kind of top tier. And then I had a layer or two below me of coaches focused on, let's say, new grads or mid-level professionals or whatever the focus was. That's and I know we're going to talk about challenges. That's the shift I'm still in the process of making and have tried a few times. Things don't work because it's really hard to take something that is so intimately me and Angie
Yeah.
and like apply it to somebody else. And that takes that. I think moving from solopreneur to business is one of the biggest entrepreneurial challenges that you'll ever face. And I am in the middle of it. But it was
100%.
needed because so fast. And it was basically Angie works more, we charge more, we make more money. And we took, after that 2020 huge hit, which was amazing, the business grew 3x that year. The goal became, how do we sustain that income or maybe grow a little bit more incrementally versus 3x? Maybe let's do 10 to 20% growth without me working so much. And so that now that's that foundation that went under the house. Now we can start talking about scaling.
Isn't that really funny how that works? I feel like before you get to that point where it's time to scale, it's like you're just like, let's get to $1 million a year right now. Come on, let's go, go, go. And then you get the needs, you get fully booked, the needs of the business, the needs of the personal are taken care of. And you start saying, oh, maybe going from 0 to 1 million is not what I want. Maybe what I want is to work less while also making more. Like it's funny how it's like your mindset shifts as soon as that money is actually there. As soon as you experience it, it's like you shift that mindset. It's really funny.
And so
So
I'll throw in a piece of my own advice there that I give to career people is that is why you have to be very cautious of tunnel visioned, overly specific goals. Because if I would say to myself, I want to have $1 million business inside of 5 years, I could have achieved it, but I would have killed myself in the
no,
process. Versus on the way to that goal saying, oh, there's a door on the left. I think I need to take it. And it's the same with careers. If you say I want to be a chief operating officer in 20 years, you might miss the opportunity to be a CEO in 15 because you're not looking at the doors that you're passing along the way. So it's important to, I think, have a compass point, but be a little bit flexible on the routes that get you there.
if you had to look back at like what you've been through and what you're going through right now, is there anything that you would have done differently in terms of like setting yourself up for the next level?
There's definitely a few things there's lots of things I do differently over like the 13 various entrepreneurial hustles I've had over the years. This is the one that worked and feeds us and bought us a house. But I would still do things. There's a couple things I would do differently, and I even recommend them to people who are working on shifting into kind of first a solopreneurial venture that they have the intention of growing. And I think it would have been to have a stronger vision and I think a stronger vision from the get-go so that I was a little bit more aware and predictive of things I needed to be doing to get there, like a step ahead. Versus this, when Career Benders was founded, I was at a point in my career where I knew it was time to step out on my own. I knew I wanted to have a low overhead, low startup cost business. That means coaching consulting space. And I knew I had an affinity for this coaching work. I came across the career specialty and it was like, boom, hit me in the face. This is exactly what I should be doing. And I just like literally 5 days later, website, crappy clip art logo, throwing out my opinions on LinkedIn, and I was there. And so, and it was basically just go, go, go from the start. And I always knew I wanted to have a business and not just be a coach. But in the effort to be a coach, I lost sight of the fact that I wanted to grow a business.
Yeah.
And so things I wish I would have done from start were I wish I would have done a better job of building this is a very, very just tactical piece of advice. I wish I would have done a better job of capturing contacts and growing a database from day one, because I think that there's a year to 2 years of data that we just don't have. And that could be thousands of contacts. I also wish I would have been more consistent across our content creation and social media for those first couple years too. But I think more from a bigger picture, I wish I would have been like one step ahead of myself. So when in April of 2020 is when things blew up, because the world went into crisis and everybody started having the existential dilemma of, oh man, what do I want to be when I grow up? I better do it before the world ends, which is why overnight things went crazy. And I had been considering bringing on another coach, and I had to pause because as a business owner, you don't know what that kind of world crisis is going to do to your business. And I wish I had just done it a month prior when I first thought about it. Like, you have to make those big business decisions 25% sooner than you're comfortable doing them, or you're behind the 8 ball. Because at that point, when I did attempt to bring on another coach and train them, I had no bandwidth to do it. And it was doomed to failure from the start. We weren't set up for success. And so I think that's probably what I wish I had done differently, is be more predictive of what the business was going to need and get ahead of it, and do that a little bit before I even needed to, even if that meant taking on a hair of risk.
Yeah, totally. Like the analogy I use is the Goldilocks Zone, like in space, right? They talk about the Goldilocks Zone in terms of like how warm a planet is compared to its sun, like the distance. And when it's in the Goldilocks Zone, it's just right for life. Too close, it's too hot. Too far, it's too cold, right? And it's the same in your business. When let's say your capacity is 10, if you wait till you get to 10, you're way too busy to bring someone on. If you're at like 3 or 4, you don't have enough work or enough money to do it. But when you're at like that 7 to 8, you're like, things are good, things are comfy, and that's the moment to act. But lots of times we're like, instead of hiring that coach, it's like it's kind of like what you said. It's like we're uncertain, we're scared, we don't know what to do, so we don't do it. But it's like that's that 25%, that's that buffer that you need. Otherwise, so many times we get to that point, we're so busy, we just want somebody in there, we bring them in, we just throw stuff at them, and then they fail because we rushed it, we didn't give them enough time, we didn't give them the resources. So I love what you're saying, but it is tough to do in practice.
It's tough. And if you're not aware and in tune and you don't do it, what happens is you get to 10 and then you have to figure out how to go back to 8 in order to put that stuff in motion so that you collectively with the new resource can get back to 12. It's that then you end up in the very awkward have to slow down in order to then speed back up. And no entrepreneur likes that feeling, but sometimes, if you miss that sweet spot, that's where you're going to end up. And if you don't do it, everything's going to just go boom.
Yeah, you stumble. So let me ask you this, because your point of view is, we share it, but I feel like it took me a long time to realize that this is unique, is that this idea of building a business versus building a consultancy. And what I mean by that is like building something that can grow beyond you. How did you come to that viewpoint? Did you start your business and it's like you knew that you wanted to grow a business, or did you start your business, get into it, and then make a shift somewhere? Like, how did we get to that viewpoint?
I thank you for I think affirming that this is a unique commonality that we share, because it's sometimes, if I'm really honest with you, a little bit of like a frustration when you play in the coaching space to look at the potential businesses have. But people just want to coach, or they just want to consult. They just want to be like a technician, if we throw some E-Myth language out there. Yeah. They just kind of want to be a technician and maybe dabble in manager. Before I started Career Benders, I was the executive director of a nonprofit. And that is really where my entrepreneurial spirit came alive. It was a grassroots organization with a ton of potential. And it's really where I tapped into kind of like my superpowers as they relate to practicing the technical aspects of coaching. However, I had already gotten to experience business. And that was what I really fell in love with, and why I wanted to start something of my own. it might sound bad, and I don't want anybody out there to think I don't do what I do because I love coaching. I 100% do. The outcomes are amazing. We get to change people's lives, but I'm an entrepreneur and a business owner first, and that's my first love. My avenue for doing so is through a coaching practice. And so because of that, I knew from day one I wanted to build a brand. That's why I'm not Angie Callen Coaching. It's Career Benders. So I always knew I wanted to have a business. I don't know that I had, like I said, I wish I had a better vision. I don't know that I knew what kind of I wanted that business to look like. I think if I could go back and talk to my 2018 self, I would say I probably envisioned a small group of coaches who were kind of like specialized in different levels or functions. But I knew I wanted a business, and the way to do that and the platform and the offering to do it with was coaching.
Love that. Yeah, I think it's so interesting to me because it took me a long time to realize that it was a unique point of view. Because it's like even like the same reason you named your business Career Benders is why I named mine Brightworks, is because I came out of and I said, hey, if I ever I want options for this, and if I ever want to sell this, or I ever want to like have multiple brands or multiple offerings, I don't want to have to sell my name. I don't want to have to sell Craig Severinsen. Right. And so it's
you and I even have those same thoughts. That's like, exactly.
See, and so it's funny to find someone that's, because normally this is like, I have to, again, I'm not trying to like badmouth anyone, but normally it's like, I have to like educate people around this in order for them to like start going, oh my goodness, you're right. Like, and not that if you name your business, there's plenty of people who name their business after themselves and did just fine and they sold it and they've gotten big, there's nothing about that, but it's this mindset of building a business, not just a consultancy.
Yep. The we mentality.
We mentality. Yeah, totally. 100%.
Yeah.
Hey, I always recommend this book. You asked me on your podcast last week to recommend a book, and I couldn't think of one, but Built to Sell by John Warlow is one of the best books for this idea in terms of like building a business with options. You can exit, you can put a CEO or a board in place, or you can sell it. That is 100% a book I recommend to everybody.
It's funny you say that because I keep seeing this Mark Cuban meme that says, if you have an exit strategy, you're not passionate enough about your business. And I don't necessarily know I entirely agree with that. If you have a 3-year exit strategy, you're just in an investment scenario versus building a business that has the possibility of a succession. Totally different ballgame. Built to Sell. I haven't read that. Thank you for giving me that recommendation. I'll add it to the cart along with the other ones that you added last week.
It's a short book, but it's great.
Cool.
Okay, cool. So what are you focused on right now to grow your business? So you said, we kind of set the stage in terms of like you're in the middle of switching from growth to scale. So like, what's the focus right now?
Sure. It's really interesting. It's got a few different aspects to it. In the last year, I would say, I feel like we've shifted really into like a space of thought leadership in career topics. So, people start to reach out to us for contributions to articles and that kind of stuff, which is, I think, really like affirming and validating around where you play in your industry. And that kind of stuff is one aspect of kind of like, being the owner and founder, but more of like the thought leader, the face of the brand, not necessarily the hands-on worker bee, which I'll be 100% transparent. I am still a worker bee on a lot of days. Mm-hmm. Now what we've been working on the following for like a year, and a lot of it is like testing what's going to work. So we built an online course. Yeah, marketing a digital product is really rough now. And my recommendation for all of you out there, if you're going to do that, have a list of like 20,000 before you ever launch it. So the goal of the course was to create that something you can put the effort into, set aside, and create revenue. I don't want to say it fell flat, but it didn't do what I had hoped it would do. So tried, but now we're looking at what else to do with those assets that could give us some return on the investment. So starting to look at how to productize the method to my madness and what's in my head is one avenue that we've been working on for about the last year and different iterations of how that looks. And it's funny, after some failures, there's a few things at play that look like some of that time is actually going to pay off just in ways I never would have expected. Can't reveal some of that stuff yet. On the other side, we're back to the idea of starting to bring in a coach. I've tried a few different iterations of this, and I would say, haven't worked in the long run for various reasons. And I've learned enough now to really see, I think, how that first step of that is going to work. And so literally this week, we're working on starting to onboard somebody so that we can diversify who's actually doing the coaching and begin to scale in that like one-on-one space, because a lot of people will dog the onesie twosies when it gets to coaching and consulting. But, I bought a house because of the onesie twosies. Like, let's just be real. And it's where, I really resonate. I have not found a group method or a, let's say, scaled coaching methodology that I feel good about and resonates with clients. And so I would rather build a small firm of people providing really intimate boutique level one-on-one. And we're finally now going to do that in a way that I think is going to stick. And so that's exciting. And once that one is there for more than a month or two and really gets independent in her work, which is what we've never gotten to before, then I think that ball will get rolling much faster. And then it's really just like try which blocks are going to create the right foundation. And I think we've got a few of them. We're missing a few. We've tried to put them together one way and it didn't work. And now we're assembling a different way and we're learning every single time. And once those blocks are put together correctly, you build the house really fast.
Yeah, totally. You know what I love about you saying that you're not outright saying, but it's because I'm in the same space in terms of consulting. And I also rail against the name coach. And I think it's because there's so much in the coaching industry that it's like, you look at it and you're just like, why is this standard? And one of those things is to scale as big as you can and not worry about the outcomes of your clients.
The quality.
And what you're saying behind what you're saying is, man, I could probably build some sort of group program and market the crap out of it and maybe even like get a lot more money. But these one-on-one clients get better results and like they're paying the bills, and like it's better to have a quality, intimate relationship than it is to try and like just blow it up, which is the opposite approach of what a lot of people are taking, but in the long run is the better approach.
I think I agree with you. And I don't think I realized that's how I felt about all of it until you just gave me the words, but it's very true. I don't want to scale for scale's sake. I want to scale in a way that is within alignment and integrity to our core values and the way I have coached for 5 years. I don't want to break down Career Bender's brand by just saying, okay, here's a course, go market or a group coaching program that doesn't provide the accountability or the high touch, or here's a $200 resume service that's going to give you a crap outcome because there's none of those out there. Here, because we can, I'm not going to take $200 for somebody if it's not going to do anything for them. No. And that may make the growth and the scaling a little bit more complex, a little bit more strategic, a little bit more intricate, and a little longer. But like you said, in the long run, I feel like I'm going to end up with a business that I feel much better about and a credibility that goes with it.
Well, so, the path to $1 million, say, so like, I think first we have to say, hey, guess what? You're still going to be profitable. You're still going to be successful. But it's like the path to like $1 million or multi-million-dollar business is a little bit longer to go the route of like quality over quantity. But if you look at these, and it's if you look at the people in like the marketing consulting space who pump up these giant businesses like $1 million really, really quickly, like we're talking like a year, 2 years, like a good majority of them, I'm not going to say a number because I don't know, but a good majority of them will fall flat within the next couple years. Like, they're this big name right now, and then suddenly they're gone. And why is that? It's because they pumped a ton of people in with great marketing, but then they couldn't deliver on the promise, and their word of mouth, their reputation ruined the whole thing. So this is great for those, 27-year-old taking pictures on the beach. I made $1 million, $2 million, and now I'm set for the rest of my life or whatever. I'm there, not going to do anything else. But for everyone in the program, they got hosed, right? So it's like, to me, the path might be a little bit shorter to get to $1 million, but your business is going to thrive. You're going to be good, and your reputation is going to be so solid that you're going to have a business for life. And that, to me, is more important than pumping it up really fast.
Well, and it's also more, if you think about it, the financial rewards are greater. It's super cool to crop up $1 million business inside of a year or two, bank it, and go live off the interest on a beach for 20 years. But if you spend 5 to 7 years very intentionally growing $1 million business that's going to last, now I've made $20 million plus over 20 years, probably more, because it's going to continue to scale and to build on that $1 million foundation. So it's way better, even just if you work the numbers in the long run. To what is the tortoise and the hare? I love all those fables. They're so true.
And you can't get to that level without getting the systems in place to get there. So like, as you get there, your life actually gets richer if you do it correctly. There are plenty of stories of CEOs that have no life, but if you maintain that philosophy of thriving business and full life, you can grow a business really big. That the bigger it gets, the less you have to be doing everything, which is awesome.
It is so cool.
So we're probably out of time, Angie, but what, if someone wants to find out more about you, they want to work with Career Benders, where do they go? Where should we send them?
We are online at Career Benders. There's an S on the end of that, careerbenders.com. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so I would love for you to connect with me there. I'll fill up your newsfeed. And, all of our socials, Career Benders as well. So we try to have a little bit of everything everywhere, but Central Hub's definitely the website. There are, you can read about all the different offerings that we have. You can book a free strategy session there, read, my, however interesting it is to you, story, and all of the things.
Awesome. And I'll say, Angie and I met at a conference where she presented on LinkedIn. And during her whole presentation, I was like, yeah, that's what I said. Yeah, that's what I said. Yeah, this is awesome. It was like everything she said, it was just 100% gold. So she knows her stuff when it comes to LinkedIn. Who should reach out to Angie? Like, who would be your ideal person to reach out and work with you?
I'm going to say there's probably two. From a career perspective, I really focus on mid-career through, senior and executive and C-suite professionals who are primarily in the technology space. Thanks to engineering degree, that helped there without me even really thinking about it. And so that's kind of my specialty, although we do have options and services for everything down to a new grad. So, if you want to level up or you're in a job search and struggling, that's what the career side is really, really geared for. And we can land you in we've had some great outcomes in the last year and a half. And then on the flip side, if you tune into Craig and you're like, man, I'd love to get to this point of building to scale, but you need to figure out how to even get to the point of like, what do I start? How do I transition from employment into entrepreneurship? And how do I get at least to the point of growth to take advantage of a scaling kind of framework? That's kind of the fun business stuff we dabble into.
Cool. So it sounds like if you're like mid-career and you're like, man, I really want to be in that C-suite, contact Angie. If you're an employee, you're like, man, I really want to start a business, contact Angie. Awesome.
Those are my two favorite clients to work with. So yes.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, this was awesome. Thanks, Craig.
Thanks so much for listening. If this episode helped you, share with someone who needs to hear it as well. For more information on how you can work with me and great resources for your business, head over to builttoscalehq.com. Join us next time for Built to Scale. And until then, take some fast, focused, imperfect action. I believe in you. I got your back. We'll talk soon.